Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We're going to recap Week 7 of the SEC season. Believe it or not, that is the halfway point of the regular season.
Wow.
It goes by so quickly. But we say that every year, and here we are. But obviously, much more SEC baseball to go than what we've had so far, so that's exciting. And honestly, we need that to try to figure out what the heck is going on. So let's talk a little bit about Week 7. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover is brought to you by Pitch Logic. And by the way, for those watching on the video, Mark is sporting his Pitch Logic T-shirt and modeling it very salaciously there, I would say. There was a little bit of there was I mean, that's worth at least $2.50 in tips right there. I mean $2.50.
Yeah, right.
But there was a lot more shaking going on there than I anticipated, but it's got me distracted from my ad read. Pitch Logic is the system used by players, coaches, scouts, and instructors at all levels of play, from youth leagues to the big leagues. The easy-to-use and affordable technology makes the platform accessible to every player at every level. All the metrics and features used at the highest level. See pitchlogic.com for more information. All right, Mark, let's get to some Week 7 stuff. I was in Fayetteville. First of all, wonderful time in Fayetteville. It was kind of funny. Arkansas fans were it felt very invested in me being in Fayetteville, my first time in Fayetteville, because I kept getting asked on social media how I was enjoying my time. It was kind of like when you go over to somebody's house for the first time and they're like, "Are you good? Can I get you anything? Like, do you need something to drink?" Which is very kind of them. I'm not making fun. It was very kind of them, but it's not something I'm used to. So, but I did have a good time. It's a beautiful stadium, obviously, a beautiful setting. That area of Northwest Arkansas, and I've driven through that area, so I knew that the area itself was beautiful. But yeah, so I had a good time. The food at the ballpark, aces, some of the best ballpark food you're going to get. Shout out to the pulled pork fries I had on Thursday night, which is just what it sounds like, and which is to say delightful. Not good for my cholesterol probably, but that's okay. We can rectify that some other day. But it was good. And, the people, very kind, very friendly folks around the ballpark, fans around the ballpark were kind of great to chat with. So I had a good time in Fayetteville, looking forward to making a return trip at some point. So
yeah, looked like there were great crowds too. I mean, the place looked packed.
There were, yeah. The Friday night game was the season high so far, but they had 11,000 and change both the first two nights, and then 10 and change on Saturday afternoon. So yeah, really good crowds all 3 days. And you feel it when you're trying to, even after having done the post-game press conferences and stuff, there was still traffic leaving because there were that many people at that stadium trying to get out at the same time. And as you know, it's not exactly, I mean, that area is pretty condensed around the ballpark. So, but yeah, minor inconvenience on what was otherwise a really good weekend. Mark and I think, share the opinion that we really enjoy our time in Fayetteville, and
no doubt,
always look forward to going back. So maybe when we're big shots, Mark, when you and I are big shots, we can do like some live shows around the conference, and we'll be there at the same time at some point. But only when we're big shots, and that's that's on you, the fans. I don't mean to put like too much pressure on you as listeners, but like, if you do the things we ask you to do, like, share the podcast with your friends, 5-star reviews, ratings, all that kind of stuff. Again, don't want to put it on too much pressure, but that kind of stuff matters. And that's how Mark and I become big shots. Anyway, jokes aside, we do appreciate you doing all those things. So let's talk about that series first, Mark. My big takeaway is just that Arkansas is just better than LSU in every facet of the game right now. Starting pitching, and obviously when you have Hagen Smith, that's a little bit of a cheat code, if you will. But starting pitching from front to back is better right now. The bullpen is miles better. I mean, that's probably the biggest discrepancy is the Arkansas bullpen, which by the way, is getting better because Ben Bybee came back.
You just keep adding to it.
Came back. Dylan Carter is coming back. I mean, they're not going to have enough innings for guys. And DVH kind of said something to that effect in post game of game 2 of like, yeah, we've got some guys we just need to throw tomorrow, which is like a great problem to have because most teams have the opposite problem where it's like we have to find someone to throw tomorrow. But yeah, so that's a huge discrepancy. And while neither lineup is going to make anybody that excited, Arkansas just seems to come through. They got a lot of big hits. They also got a lot of production up and down the lineup. I know in game 1, Ty Wilmsmeyer in the 9-hole was great. In the finale, Will Edmondson late in the lineup was great. They started 12 different position players in the 3 games. So they shuffle a lot of pieces in and out. And it felt a little bit different than LSU's lineup where, when their guys aren't going, the lineup doesn't really seem to go. And so that felt like a key difference there. But to me, it was just a comprehensive sweep. The game scores themselves were pretty close, generally speaking, but it was one of those deals where Arkansas felt in control the entire weekend. Even in the extra inning game, they just felt in control of the proceedings from start to finish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where would the weakness be for Arkansas? I mean, we thought going in it was, run production. Do they have the person in the middle of the order? But it seems like they're getting it done with just different guys in the lineup. Each day there's a different hero or a different, guy who gets maybe only gets one hit, but it comes at a really crucial time. It just seems like they're kind of making that work where, they don't have the offense of some of the other teams, at least not statistically, but they're able to get the clutch hits and enough of them, right, in volume and bunching them together and things of that nature in order to have a successful offense. And obviously pitching, you love the rotation and there's just so many options in the bullpen. They can mix and match. And love me some Will McIntyre, man. I mean, he just comes in and he just wills it, right? He's just so tough and savvy and just knows what he's doing out there. And that's a true weapon.
Yeah, it feels, I think I've made the comparison on this podcast before. It feels a little like what Kevin Kopps was a few years ago in terms of we can use him to get one out in this jam, or we can use him to throw 4 innings if we need to. The difference being, I think I don't think, and maybe I'll be wrong about this, but my perception of it right now is that he's not going to be as dominant as Kopps was, right? Because Kopps had that one pitch that nobody could do anything with. And McIntyre is more like he's got a full arsenal. Now, it is cutter heavy, so that is similar, but he is working with like what feels a little more like a varied repertoire. So there's a little difference there. So I don't know if he's going to dominate quite in the same way, but man, he's so valuable in that role. And honestly, he doesn't have to dominate the same way because let's be honest, the Kopps year, it was Kopps and what else, right? This year it's kind of like we got all these options. So there is the advantage of just, he's been great and they don't have to put anything on him that they don't have to. Right. So yeah, as far as a weakness, like there is a scenario, and I don't know when they play A&M in the schedule, but like, is there a scenario where not on Higgins Smith's day, but let's say on a Tiger or a Molina day, because both those guys had their, Molina gave up some runs, or Tiger gave some runs. Molina gave up a few, was pretty good though, but those guys aren't untouchable. They're very, very good. So, is there a scenario where A&M with that lineup puts 6 or 7 runs on them in a couple innings? Sure. And then what do you do then? Because that lineup's not really built to come back from stuff like that. But I'm not so sure if that's a weakness so much as it's just like a way in which the team's not equipped to win games, but every team has those things, So I'm not so sure if it's a weakness or just like a way in which they could be vulnerable, but that's no different than anybody else in the conference, frankly.
And, Auburn has that kind of offense and they were able to they did drop a game, but they were able to.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Yeah. Yeah. I forget about that. I mean, we'll get to Auburn here in a little bit, but like, I forget how competitive Auburn was in that series. I went back and looked at it today, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Auburn was right there, which just goes to show you how tightly bunched these teams are. But anyway, go ahead.
I was going to talk about LSU for a minute. I mean, I think how their rotation goes, they're going to go. If they can go out and get the 6, 7 inning start and minimize what they need at the end of the game from other guys. I think that's the formula, and obviously everyone would love that, but they have been able to get it at times. I mean, Coleman is, he's second in the SEC to strikeouts behind Superman, right? So he's been able to really be dominant, but he was just okay. I mean, you were there. I only saw part of that game, but he wasn't as dominant as he'd been. And Gage Jump can, one game he strikes out 8, and the next game he's not, at that level. He's not missing bats at the same way. So, and then what are they going to do in the third spot? Do you go back to Hurd? Do you go to Anderson? Do you run Coleman back out there again? I mean, all of those are decent options, but is that going to give you what you need? And what do you need in the bullpen, right? Maybe one or a couple of those guys, maybe they suit better in the pen, right? So for me, that's I think LSU, we said all offseason, the pitching is going to need to carry them. And we thought that rotation would be one of the best in the country, and it may still be, but it wasn't as good as Arkansas's. And it, with the schedule that they faced, it wasn't as good as Mississippi State's. And I mean, you say what you want about Florida, but it probably was as good as Florida's. So that, and you got Vandy. Well, I know where I'm leaning there. And then you got Tennessee. And depending on their health, I probably would go Tennessee there. So it's kind of one of those where that was the strength, but compared to the top of the conference, is it really a strength? Okay. Now maybe against the rest of civilization it is, but that's not who you're playing. Because as we're going to get into, I mean, these are just embarrassingly difficult schedules that some of these clubs are playing right now, and there's any kind of weakness or lack of strength is going to be exposed, and I think that's where we are with LSU.
Agreed. I think the biggest canary in the coal mine, kind of where the bullpen is right now, is in game 2 of the series. Griffin Herring comes in and he's great. It's like 4 2/3 innings. He strikes out 8 guys, throws 70 pitches, but that's a double-edged sword for me. It's great that he can do that, but should you be asking him to do that?
Because he's done at that point.
Yeah,
you're pushing all your chips in to win that game with them,
right?
And hey, maybe that's what you need to do to make sure you get one, and it just didn't work out.
I mean, maybe you start him on the third game.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and my hunch, I don't know, this is not inside information. My hunch is they go back to Hurd. I think it being a Thursday Saturday series, although that aren't they a Thursday this week again, Mark?
LSU? They are. They got Vandy on Thursday.
Yeah, so maybe they leave it for now, but the point stands. Like, the pitching is going to have to lead them, and it has in the games that they've been successful in, but it just, I think this team's got a run in it. I feel very differently about it than I do some of these other teams that have under 500 records in the league. And so I do think they still have a run in it, but they do have a lot to figure out. That's for sure. And maybe it's a recalibration of what we think their ceiling is, but certainly they're not 2-7 bad. I wouldn't.
Right.
Think so.
Well, I mean, that's the point I tried to make in the weekend dish, that we ran Monday morning. It's, look at who you're playing. Okay. So you look around the country and you got some of these teams that have these gaudy records. Well, guess what their record would be if they just played LSU's schedule the last 3 weeks or Auburn's schedule the last 3 weeks? They'd be getting hammered just the same way these teams are. And it's who you play absolutely freaking matters, right? You can build up gaudy wins, and that's not what this league this year is going to be about, because you're going to get thumped. Everyone's going to lose a series. They're probably going to lose 2. Even Arkansas. Everyone has lost a series so far except Kentucky, Florida, and Arkansas, and theirs are coming, right? So that's where we are in the sport right now, where all these teams, all of these programs in the SEC, that, it just means more and everybody laughs and all that. But committed so much to their program. They're putting so many resources into it that they have advantages over everyone else. Not everyone everywhere, but most of the teams, the large majority of the top programs in the sport are consolidated in one area. Okay. And they're playing each other. So someone has to lose these games. And that's what's so frustrating for fans. Why do we keep losing? Why we can't win a close game? You know, you go to a Mississippi State message board. Oh my God, the world is over because they got walked off twice this weekend, blew 2 leads, which hurt. I get it. But look how good though. Look how well they're playing against the best teams in the sport. And LSU's got the same problem, right? They were in those games with Arkansas, and they're in those games with Florida, except other than the one laugher on Sunday. You know, that they're able to play with these teams. It's just somebody's got to lose. And I think that's where we are right now. And we're going to see this. It's going to continue to go. And you can have a bunch of teams, you know, grouped together near 500 in the conference. And if you make it to the postseason, it's going to be easier than what you just went through, right? Because you're not going to have to face all these things. What you're facing in a regional is more challenging than what you're facing in the regular season is more challenging than what you're going to see in regionals in most draws. So yeah, just get me there is what you got to be thinking. Just survive. And some of these teams are not, because everybody's not going to go. Certainly Missouri's kind of eliminated themselves probably already. And, you know, Ole Miss, Auburn, LSU, I mean, everybody's got to make runs. And I think that's going to be really fascinating to see as the schedule's, quote, let up, right? It's unbalanced. So you're going to get some opportunities to play people who are similar to you instead of better than you. And let's see who can get some wins. But I think that the key is you just can't get swept. And that's what LSU's done. Auburn's been swept twice. Alabama got swept. South Carolina got swept. Who am I leaving out? I mean, South Carolina swept Vandy. That's what it was. So it's all of these teams are, you know, that's what you got to avoid, because that's what's going to put you behind, you know, your metrics of where you'd be, right? Because then you got to go sweep somebody to undo it, and that's what makes this such a challenging league. And honestly, we've never had more than 10 teams from a league get in. It's going to be hard to keep 11 out this year, and you know, people are going to scream, but I at this point, you're going to have a 12-win team probably again from the SEC, because the league is just so challenging.
Yeah, it'll just depend on, and obviously a topic for as we get into late this month and then into May, just that's going to require a philosophy shift by the committee. Frankly, that's something that the teams can't control, for better or worse. But we'll have.
And we can get into that. I mean, with how the RPI is valued, with how strength of schedule is valued, and how who you play is a big component in this. And I do think the committee has valued that in the past. You look at, you know, a lot of times it seems like the top RPI teams are the ones that get chosen, and playing this kind of schedule, as much success as the SEC has had in non-conference minus Florida midweek, they're going to have good RPIs. And because of that, it's that's how you're going to get in. So like somebody like an Auburn, maybe they get to 12 wins, but because they played a good non-conference schedule and they win a game in Hoover, that might be enough for them, depending on the bubble size. But maybe a team that didn't do as much in non-conference, maybe a Georgia, you know, maybe that's not enough. But it might be because they kind of helped themselves with some midweek action, even though their pre-conference wasn't as strong. But anyway, that's nerdcast stuff. But that's kind of where we are right now. I think that, you know, these teams, you can see the finish line out there, and the math's got to work for you. So you've got to get to that, you know, 12 at a minimum, 13. Obviously 14 is in this iteration of the SEC is going to get you in. So those are the numbers you need to focus on.
And a couple of teams for which that math is particularly pertinent are the Mississippi schools. It's a pretty good segue. My setup here is that both lost series over the weekend, but in their one game apart in the standings, State is 4-5, Ole Miss is 3-6. However, I'm not sure I could feel any more different about the two teams with the way things have gone down, where you have State that, as you alluded to, got walked off twice, but very easily could have swept that series. They were in all three games. I think they led in the bottom of the ninth in all three games.
Yeah.
So, a couple things go differently. And I know that, that is the lament of the State fan right now, is that like, well, I sure wish those things would go right. I get it. But, they were right there, obviously. And then Ole Miss, I mean, they basically give away the Friday game. 3 of the 5 runs for Kentucky were unearned. And then Saturday's game is they give up 17 runs.
Errors. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And then in the finale, they just had no fight on Sunday. I mean, it was over before
home to keep from getting swept, and you get run rule 15-1.
Yeah. And it was 5-0 after the first. Like, it just at no point in Sunday's game was it competitive. And that, to me, then that's just it's a red flag on 2 levels. One is just the lack of punchback. And then secondarily, it's a red flag because right now, I'm not sure exactly what you hang your hat on if you're Ole Miss. Ostensibly, it should be the lineup. And it's been pretty decent, but you filter by SEC stats, and it's not really been anything special. But certainly on the mound, they are really looking around for answers on the mound. Riley Maddox pitched pretty well, so maybe that's something, right? But then Liam Doyle had a tough start, really, for the first time since going to the rotation, had just a legitimately tough start. And then Gunnar Dennis doesn't get out of the first. So, I mean, do you flip back to Grayson Saunier? Do you just build in a bullpen day? And in that way, it feels this staff is healthier than it was last year, save for JT Quinn. But it feels very similar to last year in terms of the issue, which is just that, like, sure, the lineup's got its problems, because that was the thing last year too, is on paper, the lineup looked great. It just wasn't quite as good as we thought. But then you look at the pitching and you go, but that's the real problem. And now you add the defensive piece to it. And it just feels like it's always frustrating, I'm sure 10 times more so for the fans, but it's always a frustrating situation when you can't really figure out the scenario in which this gets markedly better for Ole Miss with where they are right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
Which is not to say it won't, right? But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, but based on the first 3 weeks, even though the records are similar, I do not see Mississippi State and Ole Miss as peers right now in the SEC race. I think Mississippi State, I'm bullish on. I think have a chance to run and be in the hosting mix. I mean, imagine that, right? Ole Miss. If you're going to get swept by Kentucky at home, now you got to go to Arkansas. Okay. And
they're staring 3-9 in the face.
I don't know where you find wins enough to get there unless you change something, and you clean it up defensively, you throw more strikes, or your offense just carries you and it doesn't matter. And they haven't. I don't know. I don't feel good about any of those 3. So certainly they're capable of stealing a game or 2, but if you start out 3-9, you're gonna have to steal a few, because we're talking about I would think 12 or 13 is just the absolute floor you got to get to. So that means a really strong second half of the season. You're gonna have to have a winning record basically the second half of the season, and I'm not confident that I'm looking at that if I'm an Ole Miss fan right now.
Yeah, I mean, at 3-9, the amount of stealing they would have to do in series, I think, would get upgraded to larceny. I think is what you'd have to call that. I think that becomes a felony.
The math is hard, right? You're doing some trigonometry at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're an Ole Miss fan, like, all you have to do is look back at 2022 and find examples of, like, hey, never say never. And I hear you, but
you just got to get in, like we talked about earlier. You get in and the schedule opens up. I know people are going to hate that, but it's true. You're not going to be playing the top of the D1 bowl.
So yeah, very true.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
Let's talk about on the flip side of those series. Start with Kentucky, 8-1 in the league. And look, is it a fair critique that okay, they've played Georgia, who has been inconsistent, Missouri, who is Missouri, and Ole Miss, who we're pretty down on.
Yeah.
Sure, that is a valid critique, but like that's the schedule they've been given, and lots of other teams will eventually play those teams, right? But at the other hand, two things. One is that's the formula if you want to host in the SEC, is like, hey, when you get to those very rare soft spots in the schedule, take advantage. And so here they are. And I still don't know if I think there are going to be teams, much like last year. Kentucky's going to get in some games where they're going to be out-talented and are just not going to have a chance to win because the guy on the mound is just too good, or the offense they're facing is just too powerful, and their offense is not necessarily, they've been putting up runs like crazy this season, but generally their offense is not built to win that way. So there are going to be games where they're just not in a good spot. However, this team, I think, as much as because of the way they play, like, I mean, some of the errors for Ole Miss were self-inflicted, but so many of those errors were because like Kentucky's just running all over the field on them. And so there is something to that. And so I say all that to say, like, Kentucky is a team that's very content to let you beat yourself if you're gonna. Like there might be games where they cannot beat you, but they will be happy to let you do it to yourself. And and that's good enough when you consider that they are a good team. This is not to say they are not a good team, but they are willing to also muck it up and just let you throw the ball around and let you walk them. Like, incredible stat in Sunday's game where, and at some point I turned it off to listen. I was driving, and at some point I turned it off when it got out of hand to listen to the Purdue basketball game because that was more compelling. But the Purdue Tennessee game. But the first 8 times a Kentucky batter got to a 3-2 count against an Ole Miss pitcher, they drew the walk. I mean, that's incredible when you consider that should be about a 50-50 proposition, right? Every time they drew the walk. And like that, if you're not going to throw strikes, they're going to beat you. I just think that's all there is to it. So they're fascinating again this season. They're hard to read. I get it. But anybody who thought that like Kentucky's success last year was just going to be this like kind of one and done, it was just a magical season where a lot of things went their way. Like I think we're learning that anybody that thought that is sorely mistaken.
Yeah. I mean, it's so impressive what they've been able to do. And they've, like we talked about, just you expect them to be here, but then, sweeping Georgia, not just taking 2 out of 3. Okay. Going on the road to Ole Miss, not just winning the series, but sweeping it. Right. And yeah, they let one get away from Missouri, but that's still a road series win. Okay. Nobody's really doing that other than Kentucky and Arkansas, so in Florida. But I mean, it's so impressive. And I think and obviously there's difficult schedule awaiting. Okay. That's coming. But if you can mount those wins, I mean, heck, they're halfway to a host, right? Already from an SEC standpoint, because the RPI is going to be there, what they did in non-conference, or you assume it will be. So they're in a great spot right now. And then I think where you're going next is talk about Mississippi State's opponent, which was Florida. And aren't they a fascinating team? It's just, they've won all 3 series. They have had a couple of walk-offs in there. It seemed like they have a walk-off every weekend. And then they played challenging teams that we're bullish on, and they've been able to win. Not sure where they're going to land on the mound. They brought Brandon Neely from closer to Friday night starter, and it was great until he wasn't. And you just wonder if You know, he's got to get stretched out and get more comfortable in that role. But the stuff was good until it wasn't, right? And then you wonder what they do with Liam Peterson on Saturday. It's same kind of situation. He was really good, and then just kind of hit the wall. And maybe he would be better suited pitching at the end of the game, since he's been so dominant in short stints, but then just kind of, way. So I don't know where they're going to land, but they found something with Luke McNeely as a closer. I mean, he got 2 wins to leave, both the walk-off wins. He was pitching great in those, and he's really pitched well since he got that kind of surprise entrance A&M game. He came in with an ERA of like 17 and was just, he's been dealing ever since, and that is plummeting, isn't it? And then what can you say about Kaggs? Starts on the mound, pitches well, kind of runs out of steam. McNeely bails him out on the mound, and then he comes up in the 9th inning, and they had been pitching around him. I think they walked him a couple of times and pitched super careful another time. And there's a man on first base, and you can't really walk him there and put the tying run on second. So they pitch to him, and what does he do? Just an absolute missile. It got about this high the whole way, straight out of the park. And there's your walk-off win. So he's so much fun to watch. If you're not watching Florida, find a way to see them when they play one of these big games, especially on a game 3 when he's pitching. He seems to hit a lot that day. So it's one of those guys you're gonna be watching in the big leagues at some point, and kind of like his teammate Wyatt Langford. And you want to get your view in now.
I mean, from an offensive perspective, he might be in the big leagues this year.
I mean, he can swing it, man.
Yeah, and it is a thing that he tends to hit better when he pitches. It's just kind of it's kind of counterintuitive there. But the thing about Florida, and I'll see them this weekend. I don't know if I mentioned this up top, but I went from Fayetteville to my folks' house who live in the St. Louis area, and so I'm actually going to the games between Mizzou and Florida this weekend. I should also say, if the podcast sounds a little different today, I don't have my usual setup because I'm on the road. So pardon me on that. But so all of the following things are true about Florida. It has not gotten consistent starting pitching. I mean, even with Kaggs, Kaggs has been pretty doggone good, but it's not like he's out there throwing 7 shutout every weekend, right? I mean,
he's good for 5, sometimes 6.
Yeah. And then what happens is what happened on Sunday, where he's great through 5. He gets 2 outs in the 6th, and then he walks 4 straight guys, and it's all right, well, we got to do something else now. So it's just weird how it just like a switch will flip. But regardless, they've not really gotten consistent starting pitching. The lineup, frankly, Ty Evans been hitting great. Kaggs has been hitting great. I think Tyler Shelnut has been hitting great. But other than that, in SEC play, Luke Heyman is hitting 121. Michael Robertson really hasn't been playing much. It's a guy they thought might be ready to take a step. Dale Thomas is hitting 190. Colby Shelton is hitting 206. Even Cade Kurland, he's hitting 270, which isn't awful, but he struck out 15 times and has 1 walk in SEC play, which that is not great. So it's not like the lineup is out here lighting the world on fire either. And yet, when you consider the 3 SEC series wins plus a series win against Miami, their resume really stacks up against anybody else in the country. I'm sure there is some other team out there, maybe from a win standpoint. Yes. Mm-hmm. Now the midweeks are ugly. Okay. Is that not ideal? Sure. Could that be tricky as Florida tries to build a top 8 resume? Maybe. Right. Kind of depends on where some of those teams that beat them shake out in RPI and what have you. But so yeah, it's been a weird season, but to bring home the point, it's just there's this feeling about, if you're going to get Florida, you need to get them early this year, but nobody's getting them on the weekends. So, that to me, if I'm the rest of the SEC, I'm a little bit worried about, Shelton's not going to hit 206 in SEC play all season, and some of these freshman pitchers, McNeely's already figured it out, but some of the other freshman pitchers are going to figure it out. And so I think they're going to be more dangerous in May, but they're already dangerous enough because nobody can put them away in a series.
Yeah, they're just so clutch offensively. Kurland had the big hit in game 1, and then Cags in game 3. Of course, they get hammered in game 2, and that's kind of the thing. I mean, they're just making enough plays to win the close games. And when they had Neely at the back end, that was a definite weapon. Now that he's moved to the rotation, McNeely is kind of moved into that same role, and it's been a really fortunate that they've been able to get that done.
Well, as we move on here, we'll get through some of the rest of these series a little bit quicker. Now we've kind of dove into what I found to be the most interesting ones.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia and Tennessee played a bizarre series in Knoxville, where Georgia wins the opener 16-2. Then jumps out to a pretty decent lead in game 2 of the series. I think this is 9-4 at least. This is what I was listening to when I was sitting in traffic leaving Baum Walker on Saturday. But ultimately lose that game 16-11. And then on Sunday, Georgia loses 7-0. Okay, they went from scoring.
I would have lost a bet that they wouldn't get shut out.
Yeah, like 27 runs in 2 days, then they get shut out. And no disrespect, but they get shut out by Xander Sechrist, right? Yeah. A nice midweek pitcher for Tennessee, right? But he goes out there and just shoves, and they get Tennessee gets a 7-0 win to win the series. I'm starting to think, Mark, like I think the volatility is just probably part of Georgia's DNA this year, which makes some sense given the relative inexperience, not necessarily youth, because it's a lot of transfers, but given the inexperience in SEC games, I'm starting to kind of increasingly believe that this is just going to be the type of team that has volatility, and they're going to end up just on the right side or just on the wrong side of the bubble is kind of like my prediction of where this team ends up.
Yeah, I think they're going to be really good at home, and you're going to see some of that volatility you mentioned, especially on the road. And I mean, with the bats they've got with Condon and Collins and Alford and those cats, I mean, they're going to hit a lot of home runs. And it'll be really interesting to see how they handle Mississippi State. Mississippi State has really good pitching, and that's not really a home run part. You can hit some, but it's certainly not Foley. So that'll be a nice, test for their offense. And then how well will they pitch? Should pitch a little better if the ballpark's bigger, right? But that's a fascinating series to me. Is you got Mississippi State, who we're really bullish on, who we expect is going to take a jump and have a strong, second half of the year. And you got Georgia that we really don't know what to think. We think they're going to beat some people they shouldn't, and they're going to probably lose some games they should win. And where does that all shake out? And they're going to be a lot of fun to follow. I can tell you that, especially you got a guy hitting 500 with 19 home runs. You don't need a whole lot else to get interested in that team. You got more. So it's a really fascinating story and a fun team to watch. And probably, I mean, there's good series this weekend, but that might be the most intriguing for me, just to see what's going to happen, as Georgia continues and Mississippi State goes home. They get the quote off week after that brutal schedule that they had. And here comes a guy who's threatening to be the top in the draft, and you got to pitch to him. So that one is very fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons we watch sports and we like sports is to go into a game not having any idea what's going to happen, and that's Georgia baseball for you. Tennessee on the other side, not perfect. I mean, the offense is what it is, but Drew Beam really hasn't been himself. AJ Causey had his first real hiccup in that opener against Georgia, and Sechrist, I think, has earned himself another shot this coming weekend at being in the rotation. Yeah. I mean, obviously. However, how sustainable is that, right? Like, he's a guy who's been around, so it's not like he's a total unknown, like, hey, look what we found here. Like, they know who that guy is, so how much more of that do we get? We'll have to see. So not perfect for Tennessee, still some things to iron out, but much like Florida, kudos to them, especially after losing that series to Alabama to start SEC play. They've kind of righted the ship, and much like Florida, they are just kind of pushing through some of the shortcomings to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a team that can slow with anyone, especially at home. They're going to be able to score a lot of runs. AJ Russell missed the weekend. Uh, they're going to slow with him from what's been reported, and try to have him ready for the stretch run. And that he came back for a couple of weeks, and he seemed to be pretty effective, but had the setback. So you got to be careful with a guy like that who can certainly be a difference maker. He was our opening night starter, for those who don't remember. So really important pitcher for that team. And I do think that because they're able to score so many runs, you can get away with it typically, with having just a dominant starting pitcher. But as the season goes on, there are going to be some series where you can't. And then obviously, if you get to a super or you get to Omaha, you want all your bullets. So I think that's kind of that needs to be the focus to get him ready. For the stretch run, kind of like what Mississippi State's doing with Nate Dome, right? If he's not fully ready, there are going to be bigger series out there. They're pitching fine without him. You'd hope that with him you're that much better, but the bigger picture out there. And I know some people don't want to hear that because you want to win every game 100-0 and never give up a hit and never an error. But when you're trying to win a championship, sometimes you have to kind of take a step back in order to take a step forward later.
Yeah, I get a little bit nervous because it could be much ado about nothing. But like when you hear stuff like we're going to take it slow with him, we're trying to just build him back up for this, like that kind of language makes me nervous. I have to admit.
It should, because we've all seen that over the years where, and then we're going to get slow with him. We're going to see how he responds to treatment. And then next thing you know, he's calling.
You never see him again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I do think that's that's kind of the code. Sometimes it's used, but other times it's not. Right. And that's sometimes it's legitimately, okay, well, he's got some soreness, right. Or he's got some tightness, and that can go away, with the right treatment over, with rest and rehab. So it's which one are we dealing with here? And it's obviously from the outside, there's no way you're going to know. And, I do think that makes handicapping series and handicapping how teams are going to do down the stretch that more challenging when you have these. And we're going to have more of these, that pop up. It's just part of the sport. But Alabama's a team. They've already lost 2 weekend starters to Tommy John. But they were able to win the series from South Carolina this weekend. That was big for them. They needed it at home. That was not a series that they could do away with. And they got pretty good pitching. They threw Zane Adams on Thursday, freshman. Had kind of a rough first inning and then settled in and pitched pretty well. And then Matthew Heiberger, another freshman lefty, but both freshman lefty, he was really good for 3 innings. And then they give it to Alton Davis, who's last year's freshman lefty, who was really good. And, he closed him out. That was a really tight game. And really the swing game of the series, because Alabama won, the second game. And then South Carolina won a wild one where they had a big lead. And then T.J. McCants gets picked off third base. He's the tying run in the 9th inning. Just a wild finish to a game. Not sure I've ever seen a guy. It's a great job by the South Carolina shortstop coming in behind him for the back pick after an infield hit. Really wild finish. I don't know that I've seen one like that. So isn't that another cool thing about baseball? Because it's like today I was watching some of the Braves game, and they had a delay because there was no first base coach out there, and you can't play. They're playing the White Sox. The White Sox didn't have a first base coach, so they stopped the game until the White Sox ran someone out there to stand in the first base coach's box. Never seen it before. So that's kind of one of the cool things of our sport. My hair's gray. I've seen a lot of baseball, and you're still seeing stuff that you've never seen.
Indeed. Yeah. I'm glad you went a little bit deep on that series, because I'll be frank, that's probably the series I saw the least of this weekend. This past weekend was Alabama and South Carolina. Obviously, South Carolina getting that win is big. If we're going by the don't get swept rule, right? That's pretty big. I also think there were some individual things you liked. Eli Jones pitched well again as the Friday starter, quote unquote. So that's good that it wasn't just kind of a one weekend wonder thing when they played Vanderbilt. I think the thing most concerning for South Carolina coming out of the weekend is that Garrett Gainey, who's been
Got
like a
lit up
revelation in the
twice.
bullpen, it was not good either time. That's concerning because they were kind of increasingly leaning on him as the season had gone on, and they've still got a pretty good bullpen. I like Ty Good. I like Chris Veach. Parker Marlott, the freshman, has looked good, but it kind of felt like, hey, with Gainey, they've got kind of not quite a Will McIntyre type weapon, but the kind of weapon where he can come in and get you throw multiple innings, or he can come out and get a tough lefty and get one out. But the way he pitched over the weekend, I think was a little bit concerning, but perhaps it was a one weekend thing where some teams just have good scouting reports and, perform well against a guy. So that could be it as well. Let's do A&M Auburn real quick, Mark. I think all I really have to say here is I just feel for Auburn. We talked about LSU not being 2-7 bad. Auburn surely isn't 1-8 bad.
Right.
They've been competitive there were some games against Vanderbilt in that first weekend where they weren't that competitive. They got run ruled once, but the last 6 games, the 3 against Arkansas, the 3 against A&M, they've been in every one of those games. And several of them could have gone either way. And they just haven't had a lot to show for it. And now you are looking at a scenario where, look, Auburn does this from time to time. We're no stranger to the second half Auburn run. But a phrase I've used a lot recently is it's getting late early, and so they really are going to have to start picking some stuff off that maybe we don't anticipate them picking off to get back to where we thought they could be, because 8 losses is already a lot considering how much is left.
Yeah, I think that obviously they're not pitching well enough. I mean, that's the bottom line, and they're not getting much from their starters, and then the bullpen's not really picking them up. I think the question I have is, how do they pitch when they're not playing a top 5 team? I think that's if there's a lot of teams out there would struggle playing their schedule, right? I think I posed the question today. How many teams in the country would be better than 1-8 playing Auburn's first 3 SEC weekends? It's not many. I mean, it's really not. So the question is, okay, you still got Tennessee next weekend, and then you got Kentucky, and it doesn't really let up a whole lot. But you got to stop getting swept. You be able to steal some games against teams that are better than you or more talented, so that you at least give yourself a chance to get hot and fix some things on the stretch. Their offense is fine. It's probably better than fine. Their offense is, I think, it's one of the better ones in the conference. The question is, do the guys that you have get better and they're able to grow and develop and be more effective, or do you just switch up and try some different dudes and see if that helps, different roles? But it's just not working pitching wise right now against that elite level, and Tennessee's it's the same kind of deal this weekend. So I feel for Auburn. They're a lot better than a 1-8 SEC team, but that's what their record is. The only thing that, if you get some momentum and you can get to, that 12-13 wins and then do something in Hoover, I think they would get the benefit of the doubt because they did some things in non-conference. But other than that, if you don't win enough to even get that many, I mean, your season's over. You might not even make Hoover at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of show just how urgent things have to be, right? When you've got that kind of hole in front of you. And on the A&M side quickly, boy, they can really hit. That's I mean, that's the top 3 in their lineup might be the best top 3 in any lineup in the country.
It is.
I mean, Grahovac, Laviolette, and Montgomery, and honestly, that's probably not giving enough credit to Ted Burton, who's had a great year, and we could go on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But my big question with them is just the starting pitching last weekend against Auburn wasn't great. It wasn't apocalyptically bad, I would say, But I wonder, Auburn's a good lineup. Is it more that Auburn's a good lineup, or are we seeing a little bit of backslide from the rotation that we kind of knew was coming, right? I mean, like Ryan Prager hadn't given up a run in non-conference play or, whatever it
Right.
was. We knew that backslide was coming. It's just a matter of how much of a backslide are we talking about right now? Or again, it could just be that Auburn's lineup is good, because it is. That's kind of what I'm looking for as A&M continues on, because I have truly zero concern about A&M offensively.
Yeah. I think that the thing that stands out for me is I think A&M's rotation is as good as any non-Arkansas rotation, or maybe Vandy. Yeah, I think those two are the best. I think everybody else they stack up fine with. And their offense is going to be better than the majority of those teams. So, and then they've got Evan Ashenbach at the end of the game, man, and he's just continues to get people out. And I mean, is he your reliever of the year at this point in the conference? It certainly looks that way. He and McIntyre, right? They're kind of similar guys that aren't just blowing people away. They just know how to pitch and they compete their tails off. And I think when you have somebody like that, it just gives you so much confidence. See how they're able to win the close games, and you've got a guy like that who not only can get the outs, but you trust, right? And everybody knows he's out there, and hey, he's got us picked up. He's going to put up 0, and then let's get in there and score a run. And that's what they've been able to do. And it's not the top 3 is they're absolutely great, but they're getting production throughout the lineup. And I think that's that takes the good lineup and turns it into a great one when you got that production all throughout. They drive up pitch counts, they draw a lot of walks, they make pitchers work. And if you don't have pitching depth, they are going to find it and be able to hurt you with it. And I think that's, they've done that for years. And this year they've got more talented players doing it. And as a result, I at this point, I've got Arkansas number 1 in the conference, and I would have A&M second. I know they lost at Florida, but with Florida's pitching depth issues and, that neutral field, I'd probably go A&M. So, I mean, that's kind of that would be my pecking order right now. And then it's just a big jumble mess of thought that week. I really don't know after that point. But I'm really impressed with what A&M's been able to do.
Same, agreed. Yeah, I think I got asked on one of my videos over the weekend that, who's your top 3 in the SEC? And I said, Arkansas, A&M, and then take your pick. Like, I think it just, it depends on what you prefer.
It would change week to week. It really would.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at now in the league. But yeah, impressive stuff from A&M. And then wrapping up, Vanderbilt and Mizzou. So the final combined score of the series was 10-2. Very different series than, say, Georgia, Tennessee. I'll put you on the spot a little bit, Mark. Does the 10-2 score have more to do with Mizzou maybe figuring some things out on the mound, or with continuing concerns about Vanderbilt's lineup?
Well, I think Mizzou's got some arms. Obviously, that's not their problem. They're probably middle of the pack from a pitching standpoint in the SEC. Maybe lower middle, but good enough, right? They're just not good enough offensively. And Vandy, they make good teams look bad. So, but from an offensive standpoint, I still think Vandy, they've had some injuries. They've had some guys that maybe underperformed. It's a work in progress. And for them to be able to, if they go to LSU and they're able to handle Holman and jump and whatever else that LSU's going to throw is talented, they're able to have some success there, then that'll tell you a lot about where they are, because not in South Carolina very well. And I think that, the jury's still out. I do like some of their pieces, and it's kind of like what we talked about with A&M and also with Arkansas. They need it throughout, right? Because if you don't have that 3, 4, 5 guys that are just gonna hit the ball all over the yard. They'll do some of that, but they're gonna need volume and they're gonna need base runners, right? And I think the cool part though is if they continue to pitch the way that they've done for for really the majority of the year. It's such a high ceiling staff that they can shut you out any time, or hold you to 1 and 2 runs where your offense doesn't have to do a lot, right? And you can manufacture some stuff. And that's the cool part about being, having all those power arms, if they produce like Grayson Carter did. I mean, he got a spot start and was absolutely magnificent. I think you got a running back out there again this week. I don't think they're going to do yet, but I know Futrell is a really good pitcher, but how do you shake it up after the way they pitched last weekend? It's a good problem to have. And that's one of the bigger storylines is they take on an LSU team who I thought was desperate going to Fayetteville, but we've reached another threshold, and they're going to be an angry team in that box. So that's a really fun series as well.
Yeah, I'll see Missouri this weekend. Actually, I looked up while you were talking, looked up the SEC only stats. So through 9 games, Missouri is 4th in ERA.
Yeah,
4,
I'm not
6,
surprised.
8. Now I
don't know
say
that they're the 4th best staff, but they're pitching well.
Yeah, I would say definitively they're not the 4th best staff, but yeah, 4th best ERA. They have 20 fewer strikeouts than the next fewest strikeouts of any pitching staff in the league, and yet the fourth best ERA. The flip side, of course, is that their team batting average in SEC play is almost 100 points lower than the next lowest. That's LSU. LSU is batting 243 in SEC play.
Yeah.
Mizzou is batting 144.
Yeah,
144.
Yeah,
They have a total of 9 extra base hits in SEC play. For comparison's sake, it looks like the next lowest number is maybe Ole Miss, and I haven't had all these up. I'm just doing this like just eyeballing it. Ole Miss has 22 extra base hits combined, so that's what we're talking about. I mean, it's a very, it's a very bad offense. Like there's really, I guess.
But they faced Arkansas, they faced Vandy, and they faced Kentucky. I don't know that a lot of teams are going to have tons of success against, especially 2 of those staffs. But still, you got to hit. You got to. If your batting average is worse than my sophomore year weight, it's bad.
Yeah, I genuinely will be fascinated to see what their offense can do against, Liam Peterson, for example, a guy who's struggled and gives some teams some opportunities. Can Mizzou, is it just that they're just not going to be able to hit highly skilled pitching, even if that highly skilled pitching is not yet good? Or will they be able to do something against some pitching that's not Arkansas and Vanderbilt chiefly, right? We'll see. I'm looking forward to seeing that this weekend, but holding Vanderbilt to 10 runs, regardless of the problems in Vanderbilt's lineup, I think is a step in the right direction. And look, I mean, Tim Jamison's the pitching coach there. So we can't be all that surprised that they've at least shown some development in the right direction. So, Mark, that feels like an episode. That's it for our week 7 recap. We've got Mark and I will be on the road this coming weekend. Mark's going to be in a couple places, Georgia at Mississippi State on Friday. Then he'll be at LSU on Saturday, weather, schedules, logistics permitting, of course, is always the case. I will be in Columbia, Missouri for Florida at Mizzou. It'll be nice, Mark, to have an SEC game where I can go to a game and not sleep in a hotel that night. I'll be able to come back to my folks' house. That'll be a nice luxury for me. So we'll be out on the road this weekend. We'll have more coverage for you. And of course, we'll be back this time next week, recapping next week's action around the SEC. Thank you for listening to this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Thank you to Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. Thank you to Mark, as always, for joining me. And thank you